All right, so now that we have our roof prepped, we're ready to start the roofing process. And the first thing that we're going to do is lay down some ice and water. A little bit about ice and water, that's that thicker membrane that goes towards the bottom, and especially in the northern communities that we have, it really helps to prevent leaks whenever you have ice damming. And what ice damming is when snow melts off your roof and starts to come down towards the eaves. Your eaves are overhanging your main part of your house, that foot, or in our case 8 inches here. That little 8 inches there is uninsulated. You might have just a little bit of heat loss within your home. That heat rises and melts that snow on the roof or from the sun, and you have a really cold zone right at the edge of the roof, and it'll get all that water. Once it reaches to that point, it'll start to freeze, and it'll create a little ice dam, and then water starts to work its way back up the roof. It'll work its way under the shingles, and that ice and water is a really good protection. If water gets underneath your shingles, it'll shed the water off again. So it's a really good idea to know how big your overhang is. With 8 inches, this is a really small overhang, so we can get away with just 1 row of ice and water. If, let's say, we had a 2-foot overhang, which is really common in the north, you'd want to make sure that you cover your overhang completely, plus you want to get at least a foot above that overhang to prevent that the water that is going to work its way back up from getting to your roof surface. So make sure you know how big your overhang is, and put it at least 1 to 2 rows of ice and water on. So the process is pretty simple. I already took a part of the roll and cut it off and pre-cut it for our section here. But what we're going to do is we're going to unroll our roll and have it nice and flush with the front edge here. We're going to cut around our dormer, and we're going to stick it down with some button tabs. And I'll show you the process here. Alright, so this is our ice and water here. It comes with this protective plastic. If you pull this plastic off, this part is really, really sticky. It's really nice to work with in cold climates, but once you get to those really warm climates, as soon as this surface touches the roof, it's going to stick. So you want to make sure that plastic stays on until you're ready to take it off, otherwise you're going to have a big mess. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay it on the roof here, and then we're going to just tack it in place with 1 nail, and I'll show you why we do that once I get a little bit rolled out. Alright, so we're going to throw it on the roof here, and get 1 corner flush. Alright, we're going to get it flush and then stick 1 button tab in it. You can use staples, that's not a problem. I like to use button tabs just because we work in a lot of windy climates, and it just gives a little bit thicker of a surface area. Of holding there. Alright, so now we're going to roll this guy out a little bit, and the reason why I only do 1 corner is now we have a pivot here. If I went ahead and nailed that top and rolled it out, and if I was crooked like this, if I tried to move this back into place, I'd have a bubble just like that. So I just tack it in 1 corner, pull it out, and then go ahead and put another tack in place. Once you know you're going straight here. Okay, so this is where it's a good idea to pre-cut your roll a little bit, take some measurements. Now I can just pull this back here, stick that up under there, roll this out nice and carefully because I don't want to break it. And then we'll continue rolling it off to the end of the roof here. I got a little bit of a wrinkle, but I can see that I can pull it up over there. So I think we'll be okay. And I'll go ahead and tack this side in place. Now if you notice, if you're a little bit careful, you can just tap it just so it's going through the sheathing, and then you won't have too many bent nails. Right. We'll just roll this off. All right. Okay, so we'll come back over here now and really focus just on one side. And you see you have this little bit of a dimple. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up and make sure this is nice and flat. Alright, look pretty good. I'll put one more tack in here. Actually, I think we're going to be good enough to be able to pull the plastic off here. So I just put a few tacks to keep it in place. Again, this is real important, especially when working in the hot climates, to leave that plastic on until you're absolutely sure that you have a perfect fit around any dormers, or if you have any pipes. You can always pop those few nails there and then pull it off after. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. I'm going to pop this one nail, come back. And these guys usually have 2 rows here. So they have a bottom row and a top row, which is really nice because you can just pull off one side at a time. And if you start it and get it stuck down, and then you pull at a 45, the rest of your plastic will come off the back. And you don't have to pull it all off at once. So we'll get it started. It's sticking pretty good. Pop this other nail here. Okay. And continue to pull this plastic, sticking it as you go. Okay. Now if you are working in some of those colder climates and it doesn't like to stick like it just did there, it doesn't hurt to come back and just pop a few button tabs in to make sure it stays. Okay, so we have that bottom row taken off. We still have that top row of plastic. So we'll come back here and do the same thing we just did on the bottom. Stick it tight. Okay, so we have that top row off, and now we have this dormer here to deal with. And what we'll do is we'll push it up tight in there, and then you can kind of push that to where it's flat in there, and then you'll have a guideline along this fascia to be able to cut a nice straight line. Just make a small cut along there, and then the rest of this will lay nice and flat. You push that up in there, and if you have to trim any excess, just trim it. Okay, we'll put one little tack in here to make sure this guy stays. You may encounter, especially like we're in a nice covered building here, but if you are in a windy climate, you may have to end up go and tack this all off with staples or button tabs to make sure it doesn't roll off. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing that we just did over here, with making sure that this is trimmed nice and neat under this gable, and we'll get this top piece of plastic rolled off and we'll be done with our ice and water. Okay, so we got our first row of ice and water down now, and what we're gonna do next is focus on the connection points between our dormer and our roof. We're gonna go ahead and flash this joint with metal, as well as our sides here on both sides of the dormer. But we're gonna do another little layer of protection with some ice and water. And the reason why we do that is, one nice thing about this ice and water is every time a nail goes through it, this membrane seals around that nail. So even though we're putting some metal flashing over this, we're still poking some holes with some nails. So we want to just do a little double protection, and if for some reason a nail went through the metal flashing, this would just be a double precaution. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another layer of ice and water, just kind of make an L here to flash going up this wall a little bit, and to make a nice seamless seam here. Seamless seam right in this little crevice here. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. I cut a piece that is a little bit wider than the front of our dormer here, and the reason why I want to do that is I want to wrap our piece around the corners and go up the roof line a little bit, and I'll show that here in a second. The second thing that you want to make sure that you do is, we haven't talked about house sheathing yet, or house wrap, but before you start doing any flashing, you want to make sure your house wrap is on first behind this. So we'll go ahead, and this will be kind of a one-time shot, so we'll go ahead and take the plastic off the back. Get this little guy off here. Sometimes it pays to have nails. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to get this edge on first. I'm gonna center it with our dormer and get this front edge kind of where it needs to go. Kind of let gravity help me out here. That looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna push it into place along the bottom. And then I'm gonna push it up the sidewall here, or front wall. Alright. And you wanna make sure you get that edge in there really tight. If you have any looseness, basically when you put your metal flashing on there, it's gonna poke a hole through it, and it's pretty much gonna be worthless. So you wanna take your time to make sure that corner is nice and tight, and you make a good angle in there. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a utility knife, and we're gonna find that corner where the dormer meets the roof, and we're not gonna go sideways. We're gonna go kind of at a 45-degree angle up the edge here, and we'll lay this down, and then we'll wrap this side around the roof. Make sure that's nice and tight, and we'll do the same over here. Find where that corner is. Come up at a 45-degree angle. Push this around. Push that flat. Okay. So we got the front done. And this particular dormer doesn't have a window or anything in it. But if it was to have a window, you would just go ahead and cut around it. You just want it to go as high up that front wall as possible. Okay, so I have a few more pieces cut here. And what we're gonna do is do the same thing on our sidewall. And then our dormer will be fully protected. So I think you guys can see a little bit better on this one. It's going to be the same concept here. It's important to note, I did the front first because now our side piece here is going to overlap our bottom piece here. If we went the other way around, our front piece would be laying on top of our side piece, and rain would then come down and it would hit this little ledge here, and over time water could get behind that if any water did get behind the shingles. So if you overlay the top piece, that water will just shed and won't hit a ledge, and you'll have good drainage. So we're gonna go ahead and stick this piece on up. We'll get the bottom first. Again, making sure you get right in that corner. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then stick it to the side. All right. So then, to finish off this edge, we're going to do the same thing. Find that corner, slice along, and fold around. All right. Now you can see that side piece now overlapping this front. If any water gets on there, it'll run over this ledge here and won't get behind anything. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing to this side, and our dormer will be ready to start for metal flashing.